British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he was appalled by what happened, adding that the UK would leave no stone unturned to stop human trafficking gangs. Downing Street said both Mr. Johnson and President Macron agreed to step up joint efforts to prevent the crossings and stop the gangs putting people's lives at risk.
I just want to say that I'm shocked and appalled and deeply saddened by the loss of life at sea in the Channel. I think that the details are still coming in, but more than 20 people have lost their lives, as you know. And my thoughts and sympathies are, first of all, with the victims and their families. And it's an appalling thing that they have suffered. But I also want to say that this disaster underscores how dangerous it is to cross the Channel in this way. And it also shows how vital it is that we now step up our efforts to break the business model of the gangsters who are sending people to sea in this way. And that's why it's so important that we accelerate, if we possibly can, all the measures contained in our borders and nationalities bill, so that we distinguish between people who come here legally and people who come here illegally. But we also use every power that we can. We leave no stone unturned to demolish the business proposition of the human traffickers and the gangsters. And of course, we have to work with our French friends, with our European partners. And I say to our partners across the Channel, now is the time for us all to step up, to work together, to do everything we can to break these gangs who are literally getting away with murder.
And let's bring in our correspondent, Lape Olarinoye, who joins us right now, has been monitoring the situation. I want to say thank you for joining us here on Newsday. Lape, talk to us. What do we know so far about this very unfortunate disaster?
Good afternoon to you both, Aaron and Hawa. I think you've heard it all, really. But to bring you up to speed in terms of what the activity that's currently happening on the Channel, is that unfortunately this death toll is set to rise. Currently, there's a number that's been reported of 27 people, as you've heard there from the Coast Guard officials, stating that actually the majority were men. About 17 are said to be men, about 7 are said to be women, including a pregnant woman, and then of course there were young vulnerable children, about 3. But of course the search and rescue teams by the French and British officials, might I add, are still actively looking for any more bodies that may be ashore. I mean, the whole issue is completely harrowing, and it's completely heartbreaking to know that people were willing to risk their lives to embark on this journey and, of course, sadly die at sea. As you saw there, the French government and the British government are really trying to get to the root of the problem here, which is to find out who is involved in selling and packaging these kinds of schemes, these life-threatening schemes for people to migrate, many of which are said to have come from Iran, Iraq, and even as far as Somalia. So the investigation as to where responsibility lies is still underway. It's still it's still happening, and it's still being investigated. But for now, sadly, Aaron and Hawa, that death toll could potentially rise. And even though that death toll is set to rise, there are still more dingies, we've been told, that are still embarking on that journey across the Channel. There's said to be 4 that have embarked on the journey, even after the news of people losing their lives broke out. So it doesn't seem to be an end in sight just yet.
Truly heartbreaking stuff. And what has the French and the British government, what have been their responses so far?
I think we caught a little glimpse of that. Of course, naturally, everybody's reaction to this is heartbreaking, but I think from a governmental point of view, this isn't something to be completely shocked about. It's bound to happen. It's one of the huge risks associated with migrant crossings. There have been months and months, of delegations as how to deal with this between the two governments. They have known that people have been embarking on this journey for a long time. This is not the first time that people have died at sea, crossing, different kinds of sea. The last time this happened, and we saw those horrible images across all newspapers, was back in, I think, 2015 when it happened. And once again, it was the most vulnerable children that we saw lose their lives. And that was crossing the Mediterranean. We're now seeing it closer to European shores, where we're seeing people still embarking on this journey across the Channel. We're seeing migrant issues arising in other parts of Europe, like in Belarus, Poland, and Lithuania. So governments are very versed on the risks associated with migrant crossings. The real question is, however, is it too late it's almost medicine after death? Are they trying to investigate after they've found out such a tragedy has taken place? Even though most governments know that these smugglers are a huge and focal part of these treacherous crossings.
Wow. Lape, what role do this, you just mentioned the smugglers right now, what role do they play in this particular tragedy?
Well, smugglers play a huge role, Aaron. I mean, they are instrumental into enticing and promising, getting across channels and the Mediterranean and all sorts of places to people that are very desperate and vulnerable. So, of course, they play a huge role in that. They're also said to, in other words, sell people dreams of, getting to places safely, and they're paying and they're charging these people, a lot of money to embark on such a dangerous journey. So, of course, as you rightly heard earlier, 4 smugglers have been arrested for more investigation into the network of these things and how it really takes its shape. But I think it's more important that governments are actually dealing with the root of the issue. If many countries' governments weren't destabilized or their countries weren't succeeding and prospering as they should do, then many people wouldn't be risking their lives to go on the Channel or go on the Mediterranean or sit in forests in Belarus and so on. So I think many governments, particularly the British and French government, really need to look inward into what role they play in countries like Iraq and Iran and Somalia and so on in stopping people from actually embarking on these journeys, because actually smugglers wouldn't have a business if the root of the problem was dealt with. So I think smugglers is a great place to start, but actually many governments need to take further steps back to see what the real cause of the problem is, which simply is a destabilized government.
You're right. Really have to look to the root of the problem. But thank you for joining the program and helping us understand a little more about this situation, Lape.